It is Sunday, the 20th of December, 2015. I'm in front of the Unitarian Church of Montreal, engaged in my alternative spiritual practice of protesting against Unitarian Universalist injustices, abuses, and hypocrisy. And I was in the middle of a monologue about Reverend Dr. Victoria Weinstein's involvement in cover-up of sexual abuse within the Unitarian Universalist religious community, but it seems that my camera turned off, I think perhaps because the battery ran out a little bit sooner than I expected it to. So I don't know at what point my monologue ended, in terms of it being recorded. So I'll try to start more or less from the beginning of things. Okay, let this guy pass. Try and remember the exact year. I think we're looking at 2007. Essentially what happened is that Reverend Victoria, well, I shouldn't say that because I didn't know who it was at the time, but a Unitarian Universalist blogger going by the pseudonym Peacebang, who identified herself as a Unitarian Universalist minister, but did not provide her real name on her blog. In other words, was blogging pseudonymously as a Unitarian Universalist minister, posted a blog post that stridently attacked the Roman Catholic Church over clergy sexual abuse. It was centered primarily on the case of Representative Mark Foley, who claimed to have been molested by a Roman Catholic priest. So it was sort of revolving around that, which was in the news at the time. But it was essentially, saying, well, what is it about the Roman Catholic Church that causes this kind of thing? Why is it that this happens in the Roman Catholic Church? And I knew that Unitarian Universalists had their own clergy sexual misconduct. And here's Reverend or whoever stridently attacking the Roman Catholic Church without making the slightest mention of Unitarian Universalist clergy sexual misconduct. So essentially, pot calling the kettle black. And so I decided to post some comments saying, what about the Unitarian Universalist Church's clergy sexual misconduct problem? And I cited in particular the case of Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell, who in the early 1990s had been convicted of raping preteen Tibetan refugees who he had lured away from their families in India with promises of a better life in America. Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell had essentially told the parents of these teenage Tibetan refugees that if you put your girls in my care, I will take them to America. I'll make sure that they're well taken care of and that they'll get an education and so on. Well, the education they got was being repeatedly raped over a period measured in years in one case, and I think months in the other or others. It's not clear exactly how many teenage Tibetan refugees that Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell raped, but there were at least rock bottom minimum 2. I think it might have been more like 3, but it's not absolutely clear. But definitely 2. What?
Are you striking again?
I'm not striking, I'm protesting.
What's the matter is with you?
What?
What's the matter is with you?
What?
You're just threatening year after year good people.
No, well, actually, I'm protesting against people who are outrageous hypocrites like you.
Shame on you. Shame on you. because you used to be a nice guy once upon a time.
I'm still a nice guy.
No, you're not.
Yes, I am.
You're very sick with hatred.
I'm sick with it. I'm protesting against hatred on the part of Reverend Ray Drennan and other members of this church.
You're promoting it.
No, I'm not. It says right here, Unitarian Universalist prejudice and bigotry sucks. So sorry. You should deal responsibly with the hatred that comes out of your own church. I wouldn't be protesting if you did. So that's a long-time member of the church, and I think we're going to keep this clip short because I want to be able to upload that. So she interrupted my little monologue, which is fine. Basically accusing me of being a nasty person, promoting hatred and so on. Well, no, actually I'm protesting against hatred on the part of Reverend Ray Drennan and other Unitarian Universalist ministers, including, the Reverend Victoria Weinstein, who I was just talking about. Reverend Victoria Weinstein was stridently attacking the Roman Catholic Church over its clergy sexual abuse problem, while at the same time, saying absolutely nothing about Unitarian Universalist clergy sexual misconduct problems. And so I decided to bring that up and say, hey, well, it's all very well to point the finger at the Roman Catholic Church, but what about Unitarian Universalism? What about your own, rapists and so on? And of course, Reverend Victoria Weinstein deleted all of my comments and so on. And I should say, the point here is that I did not know who this minister was. A lot of people did not know who this minister was. She was not known to be Reverend Victoria Weinstein at the time. She went under the pseudonym of Peace Bang. She claimed to be a Unitarian Universalist minister in New England on her blog header, but her actual identity was not known, which I actually think added to the problem of some of her material, which can be properly described as hatred. So it's kind of funny that this woman's, attacking me for promoting hatred when I'm actually protesting against it. This attack on the Catholic Church, or this strident criticism of the Roman Catholic Church, wasn't the only blog post in which the blogger Peace Bank had gone over the top. In fact, she had previously said some pretty obscene and sadistic stuff about a Republican senator, and that was also an issue. But anyway, getting back to things, I did not know who this minister was. All I knew was that she was stridently attacking the Roman Catholic Church for clergy abuse problems, while blissfully ignoring, serious clergy sexual misconduct problems within their own church. So I posted a comment saying, hey, what about the Unitarian Universalist clergy sexual misconduct problem? What about Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell, who was convicted of raping teenage Tibetan refugees? Well, Peace Bang, whose identity I did not know at the time, deleted all of my comments regarding that, essentially hiding anything to do with Unitarian Universalist clergy sexual misconduct. And for me, that was the last straw. She had previously behaved quite badly on the internet. She'd even previously personally insulted me, even slandered me in a blog post, or at least a comment on one of her blog posts. And so I decided to try and find out, who this Peace Bang was, so that she could be outed and properly criticized by name. And there were some clues to her identity in terms of who she claimed to be in her header. She claimed to be a pastor from a small town church in New England, so if that was true, then that limited the geographical area and also the size of church that she was a minister of, assuming it was true. But the biggest clue was a comment that another person had posted on her blog, in which the commenter apparently knew who the blogger was and addressed her as Victoria. So, knowing that Peace Bang was, claimed to be a minister of a small New England church, knowing that this commenter had addressed her as Victoria, I thought, okay, well, let's run a search on Reverend Victoria, Unitarian, and see what comes up. There might be half a dozen, Reverend Victorias, or there might only be one, or there might be two or three, whatever. Let's run a search on that, see what we've got. So I ran a search on Reverend Victoria, Unitarian, and one of the results was Reverend Victoria Weinstein of First Parish Norwell in Massachusetts. Well, First Parish Norwell was a pretty small Unitarian church in New England. So, well, we got a prime suspect here. So I decided to, have a look at the website of First Parish Norwell to see if there are any clues to the identity of, Reverend Victoria Weinstein, if she might indeed be Peace Bang. And in doing so, I came across the church newsletter, the monthly newsletter of the First Parish Norwell. Most Unitarian churches have a monthly newspaper or newsletter, and so I came across that, and in one of the most recent editions of this church newsletter, there was an announcement about how Reverend Reverend Deborah Pope Lance would be presiding over a special meeting to help the congregation come to terms with the recent conviction of one Richard Buell. And this was interesting because I knew from previous experience and previous contact that Reverend Deborah Pope Lance, one of her prime areas of expertise is dealing with clergy sexual misconduct issues. So I thought, well, this is interesting. Here we have this Peace Bang stridently attacking the Roman Catholic Church over clergy sexual misconduct problems, and here we have on the website and in the newsletter of one of the prime suspects, if not the prime suspects for being Peace Bang, we have this notice which strongly suggests that someone in the church had been involved in some kind of sexual misconduct, possibly a previous minister emeritus or something like that. So I ran a search on Richard Buell, which was the name given in the newsletter of the person who'd been convicted of some crime. It was very vague. It wasn't clear what crime the person had been convicted of, only that they'd been convicted of a crime, and that Reverend Deborah Pope Lance was there to facilitate a meeting to help the congregation come to terms with this conviction. But knowing that Reverend Deborah Pope Lance's expertise lay in clergy sexual misconduct, specifically, I thought, well, this could indeed be a sexual misconduct thing. So I ran a search on Richard Buell, Norwell, and very quickly came across newspaper articles about how one Richard Buell of Norwell, Massachusetts, had been convicted of the forcible rape of preteen girls. So essentially what it came down to is that Richard Buell, parishioner of First Parish Norwell, a parishioner of Reverend Dr. Victoria Weinstein, had been convicted of the forcible rape of girls who were no older than 12 years old at the times that the rapes took place, and by some estimates might have been as young as 6. Certainly somewhere between 9 and 12. So, we're talking here about a pedophile rapist, here was First Parish Norwell, holding a meeting to deal with the fact that he'd been convicted. And so, I didn't know with absolute certainty that Reverend Victoria Weinstein was Peace Bang, but it was looking very likely. So what I did is I went back to Peace Bang's blog post about Roman Catholic clergy abuse, and I said, well, you know, you might want to have a chat with your colleague, Reverend Victoria Weinstein, about the problems that are going on in her church. You know, so I didn't say I think you're peace bang. I said, you know, I didn't say I think you're Reverend Victoria Weinstein. I just said, you know, this Unitarian Universalist minister is currently dealing with a very serious sexual misconduct problem in her church. You know, meanwhile, you're stridently attacking the Roman Catholic Church over their clergy sexual abuse problems. So that was the comment, essentially. Within minutes, I received an email from Reverend Victoria Weinstein in my email inbox. So Reverend Weinstein had seen the comment and immediately got in touch with me and essentially said, you know, I don't talk about the problems of my parishioners, blah, 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 and I expect you not to either. So essentially coming right out and making it very, very clear that Peace Bang was indeed Reverend Dr. Victoria Weinstein. You know, there really weren't too many other explanations for that email showing up in my email inbox within minutes of posting a comment suggesting that, you know, this Unitarian Universalist minister had some serious problems going on in her church. So that was that. It was very abundantly clear that Reverend Dr. Victoria Weinstein was peace bang and vice versa. She had pretty well acknowledged that. And so I proceeded to out her because in addition to, you know, covering up and hiding the Reverend Mac Mitchell clergy sexual misconduct, indeed his rape of teenage Tibetan refugees, by deleting all of my comments about it, you know, now she was telling me to shut up about sexual abuse occurring in her own church, you know. So again, she was trying to keep Unitarian Universalist sex